Hi, my name is Sarah Esther Crisp, and I am going to be speaking today on transforming darkness into light, dealing with challenges and difficulty, tragedy, something right now nobody is unfortunately immune to. This is always a relevant topic, and it's something I have taught over many, many years, and yet right now it takes on a relevance and meaning and a connection to all of us. So that is going to be today's focus. Feel free to write any questions. I will try to get to all of them at the end, so just put them in the messages. But I want to begin with a story that's told from the Chazon Ish. And it is about how he was sitting with a group of his students. He was teaching them a Torah lesson, and they were all around the table. And in the midst of their learning, a young boy walked by, a boy about 10 years old. And this was a boy with Down syndrome. And as he passed the Rebbe and the students in the midst of their learning session, the Rebbe stopped what he was doing. He stood up, which is a sign of great respect and honor. And he greeted the child with the greeting, Baruch haba, which is not just a hello, how are you? But it's a greeting that is reserved for when one completely and totally righteous person would encounter somebody else of that status of learning and piety and righteousness. So the students were completely astounded. One, they were in the midst of their learning. Generally speaking, we do not interrupt Torah learning to greet other people, to say hello, to stop what we're doing. It's not something generally that we would, take a hiatus from. And secondly, this was a level of incredible respect that was being given to a child, right? This was a young boy. And from their understanding, they were looking at a boy with Down syndrome. They were therefore coming up with the understanding that he was likely not incredibly learned in Torah studies. They just could not figure out why this level of respect and acknowledgement. So when the Rebbe returned to the students, he explained. He said, I know you're confused, and I know you can't understand why I interrupted the learning, why I stood, and why I greeted this child with Baruch haba. So he continued and said that we live in a very upside down world. What we see, what we think, what we understand, how we interpret, the conclusions we come to are very often the polar opposite of what's actually going on, right? That what we are thinking we understand is actually not what's happening at all. So he said, you saw a young boy with Down syndrome walk by. That was your understanding of the situation. But that's not what was happening. And he further explained, he said, every single soul comes into this world for a very specific amount of time and with a very specific mission that it needs to complete and must accomplish. And if we don't, we come back into this world until we have done what we were sent here to do. He said, however, there are certain souls that have done everything they need to do. They have accomplished their mission. They have completed what they need to complete. And yet they ask, they beg that they be returned into this world, not for their sake, not because they have to be here, not because they still have work to do, but for our sake. That there are certain souls that are in this world because they help us complete our mission. He said, I was not speaking to a 10-year-old boy. I was greeting the soul of a completely righteous individual the soul that asked to come back here for us, to help us do what we need to do in this world. That's why I interrupted the Torah learning. That's why I stood. That's why I greeted him with Baruch haba. So we see that how we understand what is happening both in our individual lives and in the world around us is so limited. And as a preface, by no means can anyone, let alone me, explain what is happening, right? When it comes to difficulty and when it comes to challenge and when it comes to tragedy, we do not give explanations, right? It says actually that when Mashiach comes, he'll have a lot of explaining to do. We don't give explanations. We don't have answers. And yet, we simultaneously have a responsibility to find meaning in whatever is happening around us, to imbue meaning in whatever is happening around us, and to elevate our circumstances, to find goodness, to find opportunity, to find possibility. And we see that we just went from the Jewish month, the Hebrew month of Adar, into the month of Nisan. And in Adar, we usually think of it as a very joyous month. It actually says, K'shenichnas Adar marbin b'simcha, when Adar enters, we need to increase in our joy. It's the month when we celebrate Purim. And yet, that sounds really simple. And clearly, we just left Adar in the midst of a pandemic. It's not so simple. It's not always so easy to be happy. It's not always, so clear that you can just be joyous, which is why the word Adar is etymologically connected to the word Adir, which means strength. Joy is a choice. It is something that we actively and consciously can decide we want in our lives. And it takes a lot of strength to do it. When everything's going great, it's easy, right? Okay, life's simple, life's fun, I have no worries, right? But specifically when it's challenging, that we can choose joy, that we need to use the adir, the strength, to marbin b'simcha, to increase in our joy in Adar. Then we go into Nisan. Nisan is when we celebrate Passover. It is when we are focused on our redemption out of slavery. And no one escapes Egypt, right? It's in our first of our 10 commandments. It begins with, Anochi Hashem Elokecha asher hotzitecha me'eretz Mitzrayim. I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt. Why is it this overarching statement? Because it is that reminder to each and every one of us, no one escapes Egypt. Right now, we're all in Egypt. We're all in the state of constrictedness. Mitzrayim, Egypt, the root of it is Meitzar, which is a state of constriction, a state of limitation, when we're not able to do as we want, when we don't have the ability to go where we want to go, be who we want to be, do what we want to do, right? We have limitations. We have a narrowness, a constrictedness, which is what Egypt truly represents. And yet it's our ability to find within that challenge in that Egypt, that ability to come out of it, which is why we see so beautifully enough that Nisan, the month we're in, that specifically focuses on leaving Egypt, is very much connected. It's virtually the same word as nisayon and also lenasot. What's nisayon? It's a challenge. It's a test. It's a difficulty. And lenasot means to try. So what are we supposed to try to do with this challenge and this test? So its subroot is nes, is miracle, right? That embedded within Every difficulty and every challenge and every test is this miraculous opportunity that we can choose to look for and choose to find and focus on and ideally reveal, right? As we're all struggling with this, we need to dig deep. We need to recognize that in the midst of what we are dealing with, there is something miraculous that can come out of this, that needs to come out of this. All right. And so we have this constant reminder that it's specifically a choice to look for joy, to find the miracle, to look at all of these circumstances and recognize that we're not escaping them, but we have work to do while we're dealing with them. This whole concept of the nace and the nisayon, right? The miracle embedded within the challenge and test. We very often also mistakenly think that that miracle means everything's going our way. Everything's the way we wanted it. Everything comes out as we had hoped. And not necessarily. That's not what the miracle within the challenge and test always ends up being. And years ago, a woman shared with me a story that I find so powerful with this concept. And she had explained to me that for many, many, many years, she and her husband struggled with fertility issues. They couldn't get pregnant, and she was heartbroken. They were heartbroken, devastated. And she actually had always assumed that this was some kind of punishment, some kind of negative decree that had landed on her, and she couldn't understand why she wasn't able to be blessed with a healthy pregnancy and a child. And she went to so many specialists, so many doctors, so many different types of medical interventions and approaches. And eventually, after years and years of trying, she saw a doctor who said to her, you know, I'm a little surprised that this has not been looked into or dealt with before, but it so happens that you have very thick fibroids in your uterus. And I'm not saying this is the cause of the fertility problems, but it's certainly not helping. And it's a very simple, non-invasive procedure to remove them. Let's do it. Can't hurt, could potentially help. Let's do it. So they schedule the procedure. She has this done. The fibroids are removed, and her doctor comes back and he says, I can tell you definitively that the reason you never got pregnant was because of these fibroids. Definitively. They were so much thicker than we had anticipated, and it was physically impossible for you to get pregnant until they were removed. However, when we removed them, we discovered that your uterus is filled with cancer. Had you gotten pregnant, it would have spread like wildfire through your body. It would have killed you before you ever would have reached full term. Your uterus will be removed. You will never have biological children, but your infertility saved your life. She told me the story. It was not a story with the 9 months later, I had a baby, right? No, that wasn't the miracle. The miracle was not the miracle she thought she wanted, the miracle she was looking for, the miracle she was praying for, but it was a miracle. She said, had I been given the choice, it's a pregnancy or your life, of course I would have chosen my life and my health. What she had thought was a negative was all along protecting her. It was saving her. It was not how we generally think of that miracle, but that nace, that miracle that is within that challenge or within that test is sometimes different than what we think it might be, right? And recognizing that we have to seek that miracle, even when it doesn't look like what we're hoping it looks for. So when it comes to this idea of difficulty, of what we are all dealing with the stress and the anxiety and the worry about COVID-19, it's something inescapable in terms of, as an entire world right now, this is something on everybody's mind. And we have a very powerful statement that has to do with the concept of this worry. And the word actually for worry, before I'm not even going to get into the statement, but the word for worry is da'aga. And da'aga has 4 of the first 5 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. It has an aleph, it has a gimel, it has a daled, and it has a hey. 4 of the first 5, it is missing, however, an essential letter, and that is the second letter in the Hebrew alphabet. It's missing the beit, which is the solution, which is the antidote to the worry and the stress, right? How do we ensure we not be worried and stressed? We reach out to another. We recognize what is beit. It's the second letter. It's numerically equivalent to 2. It is the reminder that we're not supposed to get through life alone, that we need others. As I always say, it is not weak to need another. It is human to need another. We were created to connect with others, which is why our Torah begins with the letter beit. And it's a big beit. Every letter appears once in a larger form, once in a smaller form. The beit is big, right? We actually just last week had the Torah portion, Vayikra, where the aleph, the first letter, is small. That's 1. When it comes to us, humility, right? And as I often say as well, humility is not thinking less of oneself, but thinking of oneself less. Right? The small aleph, but the big beit when it comes to 2, when it comes to connection, when it comes to reaching out and offering a helping hand or being open to that helping hand. That's the 2. And we see right now how vitally important connection is, right? That we need to be together even though we're apart, specifically because we're apart. We need others. We need to know others are listening. We need to know others are there to be comforted and to offer that comfort, and that we are not dealing with this alone, right? So da'aga, worry, when the beit appears, that second letter, it's no longer that word. Beit is also the word for bitachon, which is a sense of security, right? That being connected gives us a sense of security. And it also means a house, a home. Beit is bayit, right? When we feel at home within ourselves, when we can have others feel at home. Right now, we're all in our own homes, which, by the way, is already a huge blessing if you have a home to be in, right? But that sense of home is something we need to create for those outside of our actual physical homes, and obviously very much within our physical homes. So from here we have a really powerful statement, which is in Mishlei and Proverbs from King Solomon. And it says that there are 3 things which are wondrous and 4 which I cannot understand. And the 3 relate to the patriarchs, the 4 to the matriarchs. And we're going to deal with this 4 and see how these concepts all give us insight and guidance and comfort and strength and the ability to face those challenges and help us see the miraculous possibility embedded within them. So the 4 which are wondrous, they relate actually to the 4 elements. It says the way of the eagles in the heaven, the way of the eagle in the heaven, which is that of air, the way of the snake on the rock, which is earth, the way of the ship in the middle of the sea, which is water, and the way of a young man with a young woman, which is fire. So we have our 4 elements and these 4 concepts, and we're going to relate this to ways of dealing with this challenging time. So the way of the eagles in the heaven. What is this concept? I very often explain this as when you're going up in a plane, right? Especially if you're ever flying, which I, up until recently, have done quite a bit of. I travel a lot with the speaking that I do, and so I spend a lot of my time on airplanes. And if you're ever traveling with somebody who's never flown before, especially children, you see that amazement as we go on up in the air, everything becomes smaller, right? And we see an expansive view of what's happening, right? That from a distance, we are able to see a bigger picture. And that is such a huge, huge thing in the midst of what we're dealing with, right? Right now, it is so easy to get caught up in our own difficulty, in our own challenges of what we're going through. And it's very real, by the way. By no way and by no means am I trying to minimize our own struggles within this. But it is incredibly healing to be able to see the bigger picture, to be able to expand our viewpoint, and in doing so to recognize we're not alone. This is probably, at least in my lifetime, the only thing, that is affecting the entire world. I think we can all look back at kind of monumental events that shook us, right? 9/11 was a big one. But honestly, even 9/11 affected us here in America much more than people in other parts of the world in the same way, right? Even more locally, Boston Marathon, right? I remember growing up and hearing about Kennedy's assassination. There were certain things that everybody that you knew was dealing with. But here's something the world is dealing with. There is no one who is escaping this one, right? This is truly that inescapable Egypt that we are talking about. Another allusion to this, by the way, it says, Vayehi Erev, Vayehi Boker Yom Echad. It was evening and it was day and it was one day. That part and parcel of every single day means there's going to be a period of it which is dark and a period of it which is light. No one's escaping the darkness. And the darkness is not necessarily negative, but it is hidden, right? So Erev, evening, is from the word erbuvia, which is chaos and confusion. Boker, morning, is bikurat, which is clarification. Right? When the light is out, we can see. When it's dark, we can't, right? So we're going to bump into things and step on things, and there's going to be a chaotic and confusing sense that wouldn't be there if the lights were on. And yet we beautifully see that in Judaism, the new day begins at night. New opportunity is specifically when it's dark. New possibility, newness begins at night. Our day starts in the dark, right? So that's our reminder as well. Right now, we're living in that dark time, but we need to know it is that opportunity and the light is going to follow, because following the darkest part of the night, as the statement goes, comes the dawn. So when it comes to the eagle in the heavens, this is really looking out at everything going on around us. It's giving us perspective, right? So if you're stuck at home and your kids are driving you crazy and you can't get out and, you need to just have some time to yourself, and financially we're all getting hit hard in different ways and everything that we're wrapped up in. The eagle in the heavens is looking at everything going on around us. If you are healthy, thank God, right? to be stuck at home with kids, what a blessing. There are people stuck at home alone, right? That ability to see what's going on around us gives us perspective, gives us empathy, allows us to recognize we're not in this by ourselves, and allows us the opportunity to reach out and connect to people all over the world right now who can offer guidance and support and connection. And we likewise can give that guidance and support and connection. Right? Part of what's so powerful in this is that we are all in on this together. And this is, for the first time, where we're really seeing our actions count, right? Why are we constantly getting the message, stay home? Not just for your sake, specifically not for your sake, but for everybody else's sake. Because what we do has an impact, makes a difference, can hurt or can heal. So choose what is going to benefit everyone, all of humanity. Look at the bigger picture. Be the eagle in the heavens. See the people who are immunocompromised. Look at the people who have different illnesses they're battling. Look at the people in the old age homes, and our behavior reflects something much bigger than our own individual microcosmic personal lives. So the eagle in the heavens is that connection to all of us. Just a few Torah portions ago, we actually spoke about how we were all counted. It was a very, very powerful statement. It's the beginning of the Torah portion, Kitisa, and it begins how the way we combat and don't get brought into this plague is through being counted. And the concept in this is so powerful because we're each counted as half a shekel. And this idea of a half is that concept that we're not whole unless we connect with others. And we are likewise all the same value. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor or more intelligent or have better degrees or a better job or a more impressive title or the complete opposite of that. We are all counted the same way. Our intrinsic value and our foundation is all equal. And I had explained this before, but it's such a beautiful concept that if you look at the word for a half, it's called machzit hashekel. And the word half, machzit, is 5 letters. The middle letter is the letter tzaddik. This is a teaching actually from the Tzemach Tzedek, whose name is very much related to this. And the tzaddik is that of righteousness. Tzedakah, a term we're all familiar with, the idea of giving, it's justice, right? So doing the right thing, being connected to righteousness, to truth, to goodness, to holiness. So when we look at that middle letter, the very middle letter in the 5-letter word representing half, the tzaddik is in the middle. The 2 letters connected to that tzaddik is the letter chet and the letter yud, which means life, chai, right? When we're connected to that righteousness, that's what gives us life. That's what enlivens us. What are the 2 letters on the outside of that word? Is a mem and a saf, which is mace, which is death, right? So life is when we're connected and doing and thinking and acting in a just, righteous, holy, positive way. That's how we create life and give life and make life meaningful. So we go from the eagle in the heavens, and our next level, or not really level, but our next concept is the idea of the way of the snake on the rock. Now, the snake is very interesting because we usually think of snakes in negative ways, right? Unless you happen to be a snake lover. They are They can manipulate, right? Physically manipulate themselves. They're spineless, right? So we use the term snake usually in the negative, right? Doing something in that kind of snake-like way, not usually the most flattering description. We know the snake from the story of creation, which is the one who misconstrues and miscommunicates and misleads and manipulates, right? And yet, the numerical equivalent for the Hebrew word for snake, which is nachash, is 358, which is that of Mashiach, which is the concept of redemption, right? Of the ultimate transformation from a state of Egypt to a state of freedom, from exile into a absolute state of freedom. So we see again that within this same concept, we have the ability to pull out another meaning to it, to embrace the positive that is embedded within. So what are the snake-like qualities that we want in our lives? Is specifically the ability to maneuver our situation and ourselves in the most flexible way positive. So this idea of the snake on the rock, right? When there is a boulder, a rock that is blocking our way, when it is right in front of us, we can spend our entire lives trying to push that rock, that boulder out of the way. And if your particular boulder is at the top of the mountain, and you push and you push and you push, you may succeed in getting it to roll down. But if your boulder is at the bottom of the mountain, you can spend your entire life pushing it, and it's not going anywhere because it's bigger than you and it's heavier than you, and you're not moving it. But what can you do? You can move yourself. The boulder may be there. The rock may be there. Corona is here right now. That's a rock in all of our lives. It's right there. But we can move ourselves. That's what the snake can do. The snake can go above it. It can go around it. It can maneuver underneath it. It's flexible. It comes up with different solutions and different options and different ways of going around that challenge. So right now, that is our reminder. Think differently, right? Shift how you usually do things. Where, for example, very often people will say, we're stuck at home, right? So it's not that we're stuck at home. All right, you'll see a lot of memes like this right now all over social media. We're not stuck at home. We're safe at home. Give it a different meaning, right? Boredom is the biggest blessing there is. Shift it, right? Your kids are now with you 24/7. Great. Use it as an opportunity to spend time with them in different ways, with our spouses. All of these things, we now have not only the option, but really the requirement. There's no other option to find different ways to make things meaningful, to make them positive, and to make them fun. Is it going to take work? Yes, it's going to take strength, right? Right back to the beginning of what we spoke about. That a deer is strength. It's going to take hard work to find the joy and to bring out the joy. But it's a choice, and we can do it, right? So that is really this idea of the snake on the rock, of doing things in a different way, being flexible, being open, recognizing that there are methods we wouldn't have thought of before, and how creatively we can do it. I actually just posted, I run a site called Lumen Story, and it's all about bringing the light to the dark. And I've been clearly focusing on all coronavirus type situations that have been happening. So one thing that I just posted the other day, which was so beautiful, and again, that creative, innovative, new, flexible way of making something happen. So there was a post that a guy in Tel Aviv put up that for a while now, he and his roommates every Friday night for Shabbat dinner would invite an 84-year-old Holocaust survivor named Rita over for Shabbat dinner. And she would come every week, and she had never celebrated Shabbat in such a joyous, traditional, beautiful way until this started. And every single week they would have her over. So now, clearly, for her safety, with the quarantine and with what's going on, they can't have her over. So the kind of in the box thinking, right? Which, by the way, that in the box, that constricted thinking, that Egypt-like mentality would be, okay, so we can't have her over. We can't do Shabbat together. But they created a Shabbat together apart. So what did they do? They moved their table to the doorway. She lives right across the hall. They kept their door open. She moved her table to the doorway. They were a good 6 feet apart with the hallways separating them. And from a distance, they celebrated Shabbat together. That's the snake on the rock, right? That's the manipulation of a situation in a creative way to bring out the beauty, to bring out the redemptive possibility. From here, we have the way of the ship in the middle of the sea. Generally, when I speak about difficulty, one of the things that's so overwhelming about it is that up really until this situation, our difficulty was very individual and it was very personal. And one of the hardest things about going through something is when we feel alone. No one understands. No one knows what I'm going through. No one can relate. I don't know anybody who's faced this or dealt with this. And feeling alone, which is why that is what leads to that state of worry and anxiousness, as we discussed, the da'aga, the worry that needs the other in order to dissipate, is a very overwhelming feeling. Right now, we're all the ship in the sea. What's the concept of the ship in the sea? Is that in order for a ship to float, it needs to be very submerged in the water. More than half of it needs to be underwater, right? If we're completely underwater, we're going to drown, God forbid. If we're too above the water, we'll flip over. But the ship in the sea is when we are submerged just enough that we're in the water, but on dry land within the middle of the ocean. Those who are on the ship are the only people who can rescue those drowning in the sea, right? When we're on shore, we can be calling out, I'm here for you. I'm thinking of you. How can I help you? You can't. I'm in the middle of the ocean. You on shore cannot help me. But if you're on the ship, and you reach over and you give me that hand, or you throw me a life preserver, or you throw me that rope, you're there. The difference between us is one of us needs to be rescued from the sinking, raging waters, and the other is on dry land, but really right in the middle of the ocean with us. Right now, we're all on that ship, or we're not. Some of us are on the ship, some of us may be in the sea, but we're all in a position to reach one another and help one another. We can all relate, we can all understand, we can all empathize. We are all in this together, and we need to know if we're struggling in those waters, there's someone right there on the ship. Look up and ask for that help and reach out and say, hey, throw me something. I need to get on board with you. And if you are on board, look around. There are people all around that ship. They need your help. They need your advice. They need your guidance. They need your strength. And we can think, What can I do? I'm also in on this. I don't have any ideas or wisdom or solutions or guidance or advice to really offer. How can I help? We can all help just by being there for one another. I get it. I understand. I totally empathize. I know how hard this is. I can't even imagine, what that's like, but I'm here for you if you need to talk, right? We're all going through our own struggles in our own ways, some absolutely more than others, right? But to recognize that we all have something we can give in this situation from whatever our situations are, right? There are those on the front lines giving everything they've got. There are those who can give financially, who can give of their resources, who can give of their time, who can give that lending ear, who can be helping people who can't get out and who are truly stuck at home right now. We all can help and we all can give, and we need to, because that is what is not only going to help the person we are giving to, but it's going to help us. We are going to gain so much from everything we offer and everything we give. And we see, if we look at everything that's out there, every unbelievable organization that exists to help others, it all started from somebody's tragedy, right? Mothers Against Drunk Driving was started by a mother who lost her daughter to drunk driving. Amber Alert started when a little girl, Amber, was kidnapped and unfortunately murdered. And her family wanted to do something and create change so that no family should have to suffer in the way they suffered, and that another option would be available, right? These families were the snake on the rock. They said, hey, we can do things differently. We can help in different ways. This is what I needed, and it wasn't there. I want to ensure it be there for other people. How are these families moving forward and healing? Nothing they do will bring back their loved ones. But everything they've done and everything they do will continue to help others. And by helping others, it gives meaning and it gives purpose, right? So we have always seen that at our seemingly weakest, we have a tremendous opportunity to offer unbelievable strength to someone else. We might feel depleted. We might feel we have nothing to give, but we do for somebody who has even less than what we have at that point. And that is such an important reminder. I lived in Israel for almost a decade. And one of the things that's so powerful that happens there is that, and I know obviously right now in the midst of what we're going through, everything even with our mourning has changed, right? That we're not doing this in person now. But prior to coronavirus, when it wasn't a safety issue for people to be together, one of the most powerful customs in Israel is that when there is a tragedy, especially when there would be a terrorist attack, that in the mourning that would follow, there is a week of mourning that the family goes through, the period of Shiva. And generally, when somebody is sitting Shiva, which is the term for the mourner, for the first day, if not 2 days, only immediate family and the closest of friends would show up to pay a visit and offer their condolences to the one who is mourning. And then later in the week, that is when community members and people who, know this person but are not as close or not related would show up and offer their condolences. And yet, in Israel, the custom has always been that following a loss, following a murder, from a terrorist attack, that at that immediate first Shiva, immediately following the burial, when the family is first mourning their tragic and their devastating loss, the people who come are not just the closest family and the closest friends, but other victims of terror. They show up immediately. They show up because their presence is the statement, is the reminder, I know exactly what you're going through. I have been there, and I am here to show you, to prove to you that you will survive. You will get through this. You will get out of this. You will never be the same, but you are going to live through this. And I know I am the ship in the sea. You right now are drowning in those waters. I'm right there. I know. I really know. Everybody else can sympathize. I can empathize. Right now, we all have to be that ship in the sea. And if we can't be, if we're on the ship, we need to know and reach out to those who are. The final aspect of this is the way of a young man with a young woman, the concept of fire, the concept of passion. This is really the idea, and it connects to everything that I've been discussing this whole time. When we look at that bigger picture, like the eagle in the heavens, when we recognize that we have to come up with different approaches to get around that boulder and that rock, when we see that we have to dig deep to figure out ways to help others and to help get on board or pull people on board, the idea of fire, of passion, is recognizing and focusing and truly tapping into all of the blessings that we have in our life. And we all have them. No matter what it is we're dealing with, if we are capable of complaining and kvetching about our situation, we are tremendously blessed. There are people that would give all the money in the world to hear their loved one kvetch for 5 more minutes, right? If we can complain, we are far better off than those who can't. And the fact that we can already is what we need to be recognizing. All right, as I was saying before, it's not being stuck at home, it's being safe at home. It's not being bored, it's being blessed. It's recognizing that if we have a home, that is huge. If we have food in our home, that is huge. If we have our family with us, that is huge. Everything we have, we need to recognize the blessing that is within it and how fortunate we are, because there are those who do not have what we have. As we have been seeing all of these heroes who are working these 24 plus hour shifts. Do you know what they would do to be bored? Do you know what they would do to be stuck home with their kids? Do you know what they would do to just, have nothing to do? Anything, right? So again, for them, we need to recognize the blessing in it. We need to be living in that passionate way. There is a phenomenal woman. She's my Facebook friend and a woman I greatly admire, and I'm actually honored to call a friend, Sherry Mandel. And she has 2 books. One is called The Blessings of a Broken Heart. And it is a gut-wrenching, powerful, powerful book that she wrote following the murder of her son, Kobe Mandel, who, when he was 13 years old, was hiking with his friend, Yosef Ishran, and they were brutally attacked and murdered. And they lived in Tekoa in Israel. And she wrote this searingly powerful book about this. And she, more recently, in the last number of years, wrote a book called The Road to Resilience, which is something we all need to be tapping into now, this concept of resilience. And she shares a story in the first book, The Blessings of a Broken Heart, which to me always is kind of like this perfect understanding of this concept of passion, of fire. And she speaks about how soon after Kobe was murdered, it was her and her husband's wedding anniversary. And it was also Kobe, what would have been his 14th birthday, was coming up. And they decided they wanted to acknowledge both. They weren't in a position to be celebrating, but they wanted to figure out how they could honor his birthday and honor their marriage. And they decided to go out to dinner. This was one of the first outings they had had. And they went to a restaurant, for those to Israel, in Jerusalem, at the bottom of Ben Yehuda, there is a restaurant called Cafe Ramon. And they went out to dinner at Cafe Ramon, sat down at the table, and soon after they were there, their bubbly waitress comes skipping on over, ponytail flying back and forth. Shalom, how are you? Ma shlomech, how you doing? And Sherry could not deal with that level of enthusiasm and joy and carefree happiness. How do you respond to that question? How am I doing? My son was just murdered. How am I doing? Right? So they decided they were going to get through this meal. And as the meal continued, her and her husband discussed how Kobe loved helping the homeless. And so for what would have been Kobe's 14th birthday, they wanted to invite 14 homeless people out to dinner. So at the end of their meal, they called over the manager and they were discussing the logistics and could they make this happen and how could they do this dinner. And as they were talking, they asked the owner how he was faring and how he was doing, because it hadn't been that long before there had been, on a Saturday night, a terrorist attack that took place right in front of the restaurant. It's a huge hub, a big hangout on Saturday nights for teenagers who their pizza shops and the froyo place and the restaurants. And it's a big attraction for teens on Saturday nights. And a group of kids were hanging out there, and there had been a terrorist attack, and it actually killed our 16-year-old neighbor who we were living in Jerusalem at the time. He was one of those murdered in that attack. So they were asking him, how are you? How's it going? How is business? How are you recovering and recouping from this? And the manager said, you should really speak to your waitress. She lost her brother. I'm gonna cry saying this. She lost her brother in that attack. And, here was the bubbly, happy-go-lucky, no worries in the world teenage girl. And she knew tragedy. She knew difficulty. She knew challenge. She knew death. She knew destruction. She knew it all in the most intimate of ways. She lost her big brother in this attack. So they hugged and cried and spoke. And what came out of this? How was she able to act so happy? a choice again, right? That we choose. We need the strength to choose the joy. So this very wise young woman said, I have 2 lives to live. I have to be doubly as happy. I have to be doubly as joyous. I have to be doubly as strong and doubly as resilient and doubly as successful and doubly as everything, because I have my life to live and I have his life to live. They took his life. They're not taking anything of mine. They don't get any more. They had no right to what they already robbed us of. I am going to live for him. Everything we're doing right now, our attitude, our actions, our thoughts, we need to be doing them for all the people who can't, for all the people who are struggling much worse than us. Right? Thank God I can sit here and teach to you, and you can be there, and we can, we can connect. Every breath we take, appreciate it for those struggling with every breath they're taking, for everybody on a respirator right now, for everybody who doesn't have food and they don't have a storage closet and they don't have their kids at home and they don't have anybody to speak with in that way. We need to reach out and connect to everybody. That is what Judaism teaches us. And so with that, I want to just end with, I want to show you a picture. I hope you can see it through the phone. But being that I've been sharing a few Israel stories, this idea of transforming darkness into light, right? So we're going to have a lot of fire coming up as we head into Passover. We're going to be burning that chametz. We're going to be seeking it and looking for it by the light of a fire and then getting rid of it. But when we think about fire generally and flames in Judaism, Hanukkah. And so I just want to show you, I know we're not dealing with Hanukkah right now, but, as we all are hopefully aware, Israel has had its fair share of challenges and difficulties, and with all the barrage of Qassam rockets that have been hitting in Israeli cities and at civilians. And so the boys in the Sderot Yeshiva, one of the towns that had been attacked particularly aggressively, they collected the shells of these Qassam rockets that had been aimed, whose goal was to kill them, to destroy them. And they took those shells. I hope you can all see this. Can you see this? And they created the Sderot Hester Yeshiva, a huge menorah out of all of the shell casings of what had been intended to create darkness, and they used it as a menorah for what would bring light and elevate light and create and illuminate all the darkness around. So right now, we all have that opportunity. We all need to work really hard and use all of our strength to find that nace, to find that miraculous opportunity, possibility that is embedded within this Nisayon, within this challenge, within this test. That is the work of the month of Nisan. That is where we are. And we need to realize that by connecting to others virtually, not in person, stay at home, keep your distance, we can help and support and illuminate our lives and the lives of those around us. So I want to just end with a blessing that all those who are struggling and all those who need healing should be truly blessed with a miraculous and immediate healing, and we should all find strength and comfort and opportunity in this challenge, and very immediately be blessed with just open and revealed miracles in our own lives and for the entire world. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, feel free to write. I do have a handout that I will figure out a way to link to, or you can send me a message for. And thank you for listening.